Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Pregnant Head podcast. I have a very special guest for you today. It is Maria Kvilhaug, and I've looked forward to this dialogue. It took us a few months to get it organized. I'm absolutely thrilled that she is here. So welcome, Maria.
Hello, thank you. And thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for making the time. So what I'm going to do, Maria, I'm just going to read out your bio so people know who you are. And then, of course, I have some questions for you. So Maria Kvilhaug, she is a prolific author. She's written many books. She has a YouTube channel. She has a Facebook page where she educates people. And, you know, she's like a lecturer and educator as well. That's my take on you. Your bio is Maria Kvilhaug was born in Norway in 1975 and grew up in Oslo. She studied at the University of Oslo from 1993 with a 4-year detour around England before she returned to the University of Oslo to take a master in the history of religions with Old Norse Philology in 2004 and graduated with the master dissertation that was to become the academic foundation for her later works, The Maiden with the Mead, a goddess of initiation rituals in Old Norse Myths. Maria has since written and produced several lecture videos, articles, blogs, and books, both fiction and non-fiction. Now, let me just hold up a book that is never on the shelf in my house. So, the Seiðr of Yggdrasil, I recommend it to all my students. It's on the reading list for all my students of Norse material. It's a fantastic book. And it's a book you have to keep on reading over and over because you can never absorb everything that's in it. So thank you for writing that book, Maria. And wonderful to have you here.
Welcome. Yeah,
okay.
I enjoyed writing it.
Shall we dive right in? I would really like to talk to you about Iðunn, please. Because she's in a way at the heart of this book. I was just showing the Seiðr of Yggdrasil because you've named the book after a kenning for the goddess Iðunn. Can you explain to us what the connection is with the book, and can you tell us about Iðunn? Why is she so important? Who is she?
Well, she's a goddess who doesn't seem to take much place in the myths that we know, and really hard to find evidence of Iðunn cult, like they call it, in Scandinavian place names or in archaeology. It's she's very vague in the sources until you start diving into it and try to understand these, for example, the poetical metaphors about her. And the thing that makes her the most important is that the gods are gods because of her. Without her, they grow old and die just like human beings. This is very crucial. She is the source of their divinity. That's why they need her so much. That's why it's so important to get her back. She is the one who gives them their immortality, and by immortality in these Norse sources, we are referring to something that appears to be a sort of eternal resurrection. That you grow old, but like you can find many images like the oldest Norn, Urdur, origin. She's the goddess of fate, the oldest of them, and she lives by this well of origin, by the root of the world tree, in the heart of Seiðr, which is where the gods reside. And every day she takes water and mud from this well of origin, from which all fates, all these older Norns, the fates that follow each person through life, they also emerge from this well as the resurrection that comes with the water and the mud that she waters the tree with, the tree, the universal tree, the tree of, the Yggdrasil, which is, I think, an image of the physical universe as such. She is the source of its eternal resurrection. And this is, in a way, the same with Iðunn. She lives also in the heart of Seiðr by the root of the world tree. I see all these maps people draw about the worlds, and they sort of make a difference between the world of the Norns at the root of the tree, and somehow they place the gods in the top of the tree, but that's actually not how it is described. The Åsgarder lies, the world of the Norns, the Urdarbrunner, the well of origin, lies at the heart of Åsgarder. It lies in the middle of the world of the gods. In the south end of the universe, the southern root, that there is where the gods reside, and there is also where the Norns reside. And every day the gods ride to the well of origin so that they can hold parliament where they decide upon, the gods and goddesses come there, gather together by the well of origin to have parliament about how to solve problems that affect the whole world and all the worlds. And Iðunn also resides in this place, and she resides in Åsgarder, and in a world called Iðavöllr. And this could mean the field of the returning streams. Id could mean something like an eddy that makes eddy is a tendency of a stream of water in a greater stream of water. You have a great stream of water, and then you have this small stream within the great stream that starts to turn and move back towards its origin. And it it returns to its origin, and and when it tries to return to its origin, it creates a whirlpool, a spirally effect in the water. That's an eddy, that's an id. And the un ending in Iðunn, that's just refers to a woman, a female. So it's a woman who returns, eddy woman, or a woman a stream woman who returns to the source. And the source, and this is also an image that we keep finding repeated, because the well of origin, from there all the fates emerge. And by the fates, the Norns, we do not only mean the three Norns who reside there and who represent time. We also refer to the Norns that are emerge from this well of origin every time someone is born. Man or woman, you would have a Norn or several Norns that followed you through life and spun your fate. And whether you had, what sort of fate you had would depend a bit on what sort of Norn fate goddess you had.
Right.
It could be dwarfish, the daughters of hibernation, Dvalin, the sleeping souls. And it could be elfin, which would be very bright, sweet, immortal souls, and they could be divine, and that's usually the Valkyria type of Norn.
Wow.
And so and this concept sort of reflects on another concept that is called the fylgja, the follower, which is also female, and you could have 1 or 3 or 7 or 9. I don't think I ever saw any. Well, in Edda poetry, you hear of 9 by 3, 3 by 9 Valkyrier that follow this prince. So he has extra many. So 3 by 9 is possible, but so you can have more than one. And there is also the animal fylgja, but that's a little bit different concept. That's more like a reflection of your personality and your status in life, and to see your own fylgja was usually considered an omen of death, or a warning of danger. Yeah, so you're not supposed to see your own animal fylgja. So these people all come from the same place. And when it comes to streams going back and moving out, you also have streams coming out of the well of Hel, which lies to the north, the northern end of the root of the world tree. So these streams returning is a theme. And this field where Iðunn is in Hauslung she's said to be the goddess of the field of the water spring benches. And to be the goddess of benches, to be ruling benches, that meant to rule who could sit there. And who is supposed to sit there, we wonder? Well, the gods can be there, right? She lives with the gods, so obviously the gods receive her blessing of eternal resurrection, which makes them into gods in the first place. And they also, well, it's also the place where it is said, it is prophesied that after Ragnarök, after the apocalypse, the righteous souls of people, of righteous people, good people, and this could be some Christian influence here, but if you look at the wholeness of it, it does belong to older things, and it's more akin, I think, to concepts of similar to paradise and salvation that you find in mystery cults, mystery religions that existed thousands of years before Christianity. So these are not in themselves Christian concepts, but let's return to who is going to sit there. Also the children of the gods. The gods will die during Ragnarok, but some of their children will survive, and they will survive in this realm where the goddess of eternal resurrection is situated. So that's one aspect of her. She is also called, as you said, the seed of Yggdrasil. Mm-hmm. The reason I named my book The Seed of Yggdrasil is because, as I understood that Iðunn, as I started to understand that Iðunn was not only a goddess of divine resurrection and immortality, but she's also a goddess of learning and knowledge and thirst for knowledge. In the Heiti and kennings that we have about her, she is constantly referred to as eloquent woman, wise woman, and she's associated with awareness. She's referred to as awareness, and let's see if I find anything here. The knowledge hungry, dis forvitin, the knowledge hungry goddess. And I thought that's my goddess. Yeah, I am knowledge hungry. That's been driving me my whole life, and I started to see this, and then I started to look up what other people said about Iðunn, and you know what? She's always sort of, in a way, dismissed as a goddess of youth and fertility. And I tried to figure out, why is she about fertility? Mm-hmm. Well, there is this sense of things. Well, nature recycling itself, and but there isn't anything really. And I realized, even Rudolf Simek, who has a very, very good book where you can find the interpretations and discussions about the interpretations that are given to various things, various gods and other characters in Norse myths. But Iðunn it's said that she is probably a goddess of fertility because of her apples. Oh yeah. And that's because of her apples. And I started to think, okay, where else do we find myths about apples? Let's see, we find it in the Bible. In paradise, in Eden, we find images of naked people and lots of animals and fruits and snakes, and and apples. And there is this story about Eva taking this apple, and that's really, really sinful, and she gives it to Adam, and it's really sinful. But when you start to look at it, like the Christian symbols here, and also Jewish, I suppose. Well, in Christian art, we have these images. I think that's Christian. So it comes from the Bible, which began as a Jewish script, but then it turned into a Christian script. And you find in Christian art, they are usually naked, Adam and Eve, and they are surrounded by lots of images that, if these had been pagan paintings, they would have been dismissed as fertility too, because you have naked people. But we know that Christian symbolism, where this started, nakedness meant innocence. Yeah. That they walk around naked means innocence. They don't know right from wrong. They are innocent. And all the other, and the snake, it represents the devil, the temptation of doing what's forbidden. And what is forbidden, it is to eat of these, apples, we say, but fruits. And the fruit is called the fruit of knowledge. And if you eat this fruit, you will become like God, you will become immortal, and you will know everything. This was very sinful in the Bible. This is why human beings went out. So the woman was the first to eat of the fruit of wisdom and immortality.
Yeah.
And she gave it to the man, and then they started to feel shame, and then God sent them out of paradise. But the thing is, the most important aspect of this is that the apples do not represent fertility, they represent the divine wisdom and immortality.
Wow,
And
that's an important point.
yeah, it is a very important point. And so why should apples in pagans religion suddenly mean fertility and not divine wisdom and immortality? Yeah, well, okay, so you look to other religion, other myths, other mythical traditions, like the Greek, where apples or fruits also represent divine immortality and wisdom. So they are the apples of knowledge, the apples of wisdom, the apples of divine omniscience, and and immortality.
Immortality. Wow.
They will become like gods. And the difference between, let's say, the mystery religions that existed before Christianity, but which the Christian religion actually sort of usurped them and used many of their images and also their concepts of salvation. But there, the big, huge difference is that the search for wisdom and immortality was sacred. It was something you were supposed to do. It was a part of their initiation. It was at the heart and core of their religions. And I can't really explain why here, because I have written several, you could literally write books about it, and I have. But my conclusion from after these 25 years and many books, I am absolutely certain that concepts were very similar concepts to those that we find in ancient mystery religions are also found in Old Norse myths.
Wow.
Yeah, that we find traces of something similar here.
Which I think is a wonderful topic. And, that's going to be my next question, actually, because, in your master thesis, the Maiden With the Mead, you address that whole topic of initiation and the goddess of initiation. And, in my own field, I sometimes end up hosting initiatory experiences for students. So I'm at the end of, holding the space, and that can be really tricky. And it's really hard for the students as well. So the question that really comes to my mind is, what is the role of initiation? I mean, you just opened Pandora's box when you said this about this takes us to initiation. So can you tell us more about that? And I think many of my students are women, and, they read your material, and then they come to me and they ask, like, what happens to women after death, and what happens to women in these great experiences of initiation. So this is my opportunity to ask the question. Could you talk to us about that, please?
Yeah. Big topic, where to begin? I assume that your audience will know what initiation is. I don't have to actually explain that.
The only thing is, like, my students do, but there are people who watch my YouTube channel who may not. So would you mind explaining it?
Okay, really, really quick. Like an initiation ritual is usually a way of a ceremony or a ritual that marks a change in your life, like from going from child to adult, or going from being a lay person, like a normal, ordinary person, to becoming like a specialist, for example, a priest or priestess or a witch or a shaman or whatever. That is an initiation ritual. So you find it usually begins with a separation from society, where you are no longer the person you used to be, but you haven't become what you're going to be. And ritually, this is often made into a ritual where the person is actually taken out of their of society. They have to go somewhere else than what
Yeah.
they are used to.
Mhm.
They have to go abroad, or they have to go into a temple, or they have to stay out in the forest a lot. And in Old Norse myths, you have countless, and also sagas, you have countless stories of young people who actually are either taken or get lost in the wilderness.
Yeah.
They're either stolen by something. That's usually, if there are women, they're often abducted.
Yeah.
And if there are men, they are usually going out to look for the abducted. That's a very common theme in the sagas. But in these Edda stories that I discussed before, basically it starts with the god or the hero doing something to have a vision, like a vision quest. Like Odin, the god Odin, he's also initiated into becoming what I think he is, namely a god of frolicking, and frolicking, that means great knowledge. And that includes Seiðr and poetry and many other arts that we would refer to as perhaps shamanism or witchcraft or sorcery or poetry, as a wisdom quest. Anyway, they go for a vision quest where he's actually hung in a tree for 9 days without eating and without drinking, and someone is poking at him and even stabbing him with a spear, and he almost dies. He says so himself. He's like on the verge of death, and then he looks down. That's a vision, and he sees something, and he takes up what he sees, and what he sees are the runes.
Yeah.
And where does he find the runes? I always point this out because that's usually overlooked. Where does he look down to find the runes? Well, we have an explanation of where the runes came from. They came from the southern root of the world tree, where the 3 Norns, the goddesses of fate, lived. And we usually think of them as weaving or spinning, but it's directly said that they carved the runes into the wood, into the matter, the physical matter of the universe, the tree. So that's the runes of fate that he takes up. Not letters that we know, but they are symbolic. They are symbols. Rune actually just means symbol. They are symbols of powerful symbols that he can use to influence and have control over fate. And the importance of having control over fate lies in the fact that the ultimate fate for all mortals is death. And the theme of seeking immortality is very, very important in all these stories too.
Well, it is, yeah.
Yeah. So he.
Well, an initiation, at least if you more look at like the field of anthropology, for instance, it involves a serious initiation, involves a near-death experience. And then, like if people survive, hopefully, then it becomes more of a symbolic death, and it marks a transition, as you say, into a different state of being. So you're not your old self anymore. In a very real way, you've become a new person.
Yes.
Maybe that's what happens to Odin, like he undergoes a massive initiation, doesn't he?
Exactly. So he does see into this realm, and he picks it up, and he screams when he picks it up. It's a very ecstatic description. And anyway, there are other ways of doing it, like meditation, some sort of meditation, or utiseta, sitting out, is often mentioned. That they go sit in a grove to listen to the birds, and they start to hear what the birds say.
Yeah.
And then they go to the top of a mountain to look into the land of sleep. Yeah. Or they sleep by a river, and in the night one of them crosses over the river into the land of sleep. And you have many different descriptions that are actually quite realistic when you start to think about them. The way they are described, they read almost like these ethnographic descriptions that people have, like anthropologists and missionaries and other people have been writing about shamanistic cultures or other cultures. They have very much in common with these. And what happens then in the vision quest is that they have a vision, and the vision is usually about this maiden who is hiding in the underworld, and then there is a descent team because he has to find that maiden. And there is a descent team where he has to go into the underworld, and he has to face many trials, and it's clearly a state of death. It's clearly in Hel, and then in the darkest pits of darkness, when he has sort of used his intelligence, his wisdom, his eloquence, and his courage, his fearlessness, to sort of get past these obstacles, then he finds this wonderful, beautiful, golden realm, and it has very high walls around it, and the walls are dangerous. They will strangle you if you come close. And there are descriptions of how he either presents himself, and the goddess within, she opens the doors. Like Freya only opens the doors if she wants to, and that's the point that's made in these stories. Although it's not Freya, it's just different female characters, but they all live there and they all serve the same function. They open the gates into this realm. And in some other stories, it's described exactly as Hel, that is the world of the dead. The underworld is described in other places, and there you have even Hel's hall. She also has a big dangerous fence, and in the stories you have this one guy who wants Hermod, who wants to rescue Balder out of Hel. After Balder has died, he has gone straight to Hel, and this Hermod wants to Frigg, the goddess Frigg, asked who will go after Balder, and Hermod went after Balder, and he rode down into the underworld, and the hellhounds were barking at him, and the bridge, the Hel bridge resounded when he rode across it, and he's met by this woman, guardian, who asks what he's doing there, and he when he comes to the hall of Hel, to this dangerous gate, he has borrowed Odin's 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, and this is a horse. It is a magical horse. Born by Loki, who is the master traveler between the worlds, and this horse is the best of all horses, it said. Loki was a mare when he gave birth, when the mare Loki gave birth to Sleipnir. So he has borrowed Sleipnir, who is a vehicle, as like a steed that can take you into the other worlds, and this vehicle, this horse, is able to jump across these walls. And in the initiation stories that we are talking about now, we also have Valkyrie sleeping behind walls of shields and high flames, and also they have to jump across the flames. So this theme repeats itself a lot. Freyr has a horse that can jump through these flames. So you have both gods and heroes, young princes, men, who perform this. And I found a total of 9 full stories. If I've also counted in some stories about Thor, but that's too much. But anyway, this theme of initiation is actually at the heart and core of all Edda poetry, and also of myths in general. Even in one of our oldest sources that we have, it's a skaldic poem that was composed as in the form that we know it back in just before the year 900. So this is one of our windows into the time before Christianity, into a real pagan mind. This is where we find most information about Iðunn as well.
Wow.
And this is also, I think, a story of initiation, and maybe about Loki's initiation. So
also Iðunn was abducted as well. There is a whole story about the abduction of Iðunn.
She's also abducted. I've been reading this saga. I have been doing a lecture series on my Patreon this year. That is sort of the end of a larger lecture series. But this separate part of the series I have called Witches and Warriors, Initiation Narratives and Spiritual Mentors in the Sagas.
Wow.
And I got to delve into many different stories. I have counted 13 main stories with many smaller stories that are from about 14 different sagas that I have analyzed and presented in this series, because it tells similar stories. Among others, there is this, which saga was this? It's a Illuga saga, Tagldarbani. It's a long saga. It's all about initiation all the way. And it's about this young man who's a bit different. He's the son of a single woman. So he's called Kærlingarson, that is the son of a woman. And that didn't mean that he had a father who had died sometime, but he was raised only by a woman. This was a bit unusual back then because men actually did take a part. If not the father, then the uncle or something. Mm-hmm. But this woman, she lived alone. She was alone, and she raised this young man by himself. His name was Iðunn, which means bad intent, which is a really strange name. Yeah. And he's also dark-skinned, but he is a descent. He's dark-skinned, coal beater, like bitten by coal, and he has dark hair, and so he's different from other people. But he's really, really strong and really intelligent, and he's also a descendant of Egil Skallagrimsson and Skallagrim and Kveldulf, on his mother's side. Anyway, he goes through an initiation trial in the mountains. I can't go through this, but what's very interesting is in the sort of second part of this saga, he goes to a place called Helluland, which means cave land. And this place is mentioned many times in the sagas, and it's sometimes called Gandvik, which means the Bay of Magic or the Bay of Wands. Mm-hmm. And in this place, there is always a cave that you can see in the night because fire comes out of it. And it is, and in this particular story, there are many stories like this, but in this particular story, the cave is called Njorunarheller. That means Njorun's cave. Njorun is one of the heiti used for Iðunn in the Rafnagalder Odins. Njorun, and we don't know what it means. It could be related to the name Njörður, Nerthus, but we don't know what that means either. It could these names could have come from another language or from an earlier language before the Indo-European, perhaps. In any case, Njorun has come in Old Norse. Njorun has come to mean woman, so it's the woman's cave. And the reference, why didn't they use just the woman's cave? Why didn't you just write the woman's cave? Why did they write exactly Njorun's cave? Because of Njorun's association to Iðunn. Because in this cave was originally ruled by a giantess called Hrimgerðr. And she's a very benevolent giantess. And her role in the story is very similar to the role of other sorceresses and giantesses, and even hofgudir, temple priestesses, that we find in these stories. And they always have an apprentice, a young woman, who usually is seated in an inner chamber if she's in a temple, or she is seated in an avheller, which means a separate chamber in the cave. Okay. And what has happened is that a giant called Tjøsnir, which is actually a deviation of Tjatsi in the story of Iðunn. Tjatsi is the giant in eagle hide who abducts Iðunn in that myth. In this one, there is a giant called Tjøsnir who has abducted a princess, an Irish princess called Kadlin. And she is now a prisoner in the inner chamber of the cave, of the woman's cave, while Tjøsnir has usurped the power there with his trolls. And when Iðunn comes, he meets Hrimgerð, the giantess, and after wrestling, the hero in these stories always have to wrestle with the giant, with the sorceress. And when he wins, she says, "Okay, I'll help you." And then she tells him about Kadlin and about his friend Ketil. Oh, there is a deer outside. She just gave birth to 2 Bambis. Oh. Well, anyway.
Hello, Norway.
Yeah, I live just by the forest, so I see them. There is this deer who just stays around here when she has her babies every year. Wow. Yeah. Any case, you go back to the cave. The cave, yeah. So Iðunn wants to save his friend Ketil. Ketil means cauldron, so this is also a repetitive theme. The cauldron in the inner chamber of the cave of the giants, cauldron. It's a reference to the mead of poetry, I think. And there is also this princess inside the cave in the inner chamber. So he goes there and he helps Hrimgerdir and her boyfriend to overthrow Tjøsnir. And he doesn't do it alone, because when he enters the cave, Kadlin, she comes out of her inner chamber. Usually in these stories, the young priestess apprentice or princess, she's called one of these things, well, she usually sits there and waits for the hero to come into the inner chamber to free her. And she's usually tied to a chair that and described in a way that makes her sound like an oracle. But in this case, Kadlin, she comes out and she is very bogfær. She knows how to shoot a bow and arrow. So she starts to help Illugi rescuing herself by shooting arrows into the eyes of these giants. And it is said that she was very tiny, but her mind was much greater than her size. So she's a very intelligent woman. The story includes how she has used her wit. So she has been abducted before by Tjøsnir, just like Iðunn. Now waiting, just like Iðunn was waiting for Loki, the mischievous god, to save her. She was there waiting for Illugi, a man whose name means bad intent, who's really a hero, but just a little, well, he's flexible like Loki, but he's a really good person in this story. So I don't know why he's called bad intent at all. But he gets the help of her to save her and his friend Gudrun, who is remarkably passive. So I don't think that this is actually this Ketil is a personification in this story of the cauldron, because there are so many symbols here. So he frees them, or she helps him free them too. And after that, he and his men have been very wounded by these giants. And then Hrimgerdir and Kadlin both turn out to be expert surgeons and healers. And this is also a theme that repeats itself. The woman in the cave, or the women in the caves, are always very good healers. They know how to heal. One of them, there is one woman who, Arinefja, who actually made a hand grow back on the arm of a man by using a leafsgrøs, which means life herbs. And I don't know what herb that is, but
no, that's a shame.
Yeah,
You don't know that.
yeah. This is and Kadlin. What happens then is that Hrimgerd gets her cave back, and she continues living there. She wants to stay there in the woman's cave. This is her realm in cave land, or the Bay of Magic. And then Illugi and his crew leaves. They leave with Kadlin. She goes with them, and she's a very young woman who seems to have come out as a priestess. How I understand it is that she has been apprenticed in the cave, but then the cave was usurped by someone who put her inside that inner chamber and tried to rape her all the time, but she used her intelligence all the time to sort of make him wait. But so yeah, long story. But this is the most touching part of the story, is when she follows this crew of warriors, Viking warriors, all male, 5 ships or something, and she's the only woman there, and they treat her all the time with so much respect. She doesn't have any romantic dealings with any of them, but they protect her all the time, and she's always mentioned. She's there with them, and they look after her. Like when they are in a place with lots of robbers, they make sure that she goes with them all the time, that she's not left alone in the hut. And when they come, they tell her to hide, because even though she's good at fighting, they don't want her to be. She's a target. These robbers want to take her, but she always heals them like quick afterwards, and she shows them the way across a place called Limrek. That is the heath of the wandering sound.
Wow.
And they are joined by a young skald, a young poet who gets to be challenged there, and they are joined by this young ruler to be, The young skull is called Raven, and the ruler to be is called Eagle. So Illugi gets Raven. He even hears the calls of the Raven before they make friends. And then he gets Eagle there. So he is helping all these young people, these 2 young men and this 1 young woman, to protect them during their trials on the heath of the wandering sound, until they can reach the town of Limrek, the wandering sound, and there he can leave them, because now Kadlin is home again, and she gets to marry Eagle happily. But this is also a story about Kadlin's initiation, really, and her journey back, and the whole journey. It's like they suffer and they move on and they fight and they have a lot of drama, and in the end it turns out it is all about trying to get Kadlin home. She was important to them, this wise woman, very important. So and I mentioned Arinefja, this flagdkona, that is usually translated as giantess, and she is said to be the queen of the giant world, but flagdkona just means a sorceress, and that is how she is described. And she has a story of initiation too. This is from the saga of Åsmundur Berserkerbana and Egil Einhendi. Very long story again, but Arinefja is the one. She's the giantess in the cave of the Bay of Magic Wands, who help these young men and 2 young women through trials that are also like initiations. And she is their teacher, their mentor, but she has a story of her own that she tells them. And in this story, there are many things. There is a drinking horn, among other things, and the gold ring, and many elements that are similar to the stories, initiation stories that I described in The Maiden with the Mead. And in The Maiden with the Mead, all these stories I told from the Edda always end up with the maiden in the underworld, whether she is a giantess or a valkyria or a fylgja or a goddess. She always has the same function. She gives this embrace. There is a sort of loving embrace, and there is a serving of the sacred mead, the mead of poetry or the mead of memory or wisdom, the precious mead, the precious drink. That's what they call it all the time. And there is a theme that seems to be the theme is, this happens in a state of death, and in Norse poetry there are countless samples of death or the act of dying being described in poetical terms as a sexual or romantic union between a man and one representative of like Ran or Hel or Freya or any other, or Valkyria or any other female being that could be associated to death. So this is a poetical metaphor for the act of dying. And in these stories, this is also the act of dying, but they are resurrected. They can return after this with more wisdom and with a new identity and new names and new titles and new knowledge. Always. And people have asked me, so these Edda poems represent, it seems, a path of initiation that is typical for men. So what about women? People have asked me that. And I have found similarities in many, not so much in the Edda, except the story of Gullveigr, the Völva who became Seiðr after her trials. She also conquered death.
She was burned 3 times, and they spears in her, and, you know.
The way it is described is just like an initiation ritual too. Odin is also hanged and stabbed. She is burned and stabbed. She returns, and when she returns, she has a new name, and she has a new profession. She has become a Völva, and she can teach other women. She teaches illrar brudar. She teaches the bad brides. The bad brides. That is, I think, that bad bride. What is that? That is a woman who is not suited for normal marriage. She's not a good bride material. She is a good Völva material.
Women.
And in this story of Arinefja, she's suffering. and her brothers have taken her inheritance, her legacy, which is among other things the drinking horn and the gold ring, and the game board of destiny. And she's also oppressed by her very quarrelsome sisters. And when she's fed up with it, she's the youngest of them in this group of sisters who are pecking on her all the time. And she makes a sacrifice. She sacrifices, and this sacrifice is also one of the typical ways of vision questing in the Edda stories. Anyway, she sacrifices a goat to Thor, and Thor appears, and to make a long story short, he fixes her problems. He frees her from her sisters, and he has sex with her. And when she has sex with him, he becomes her eternal helper, and he helps her retrieve her legacy from her brothers. And it says that after he helped her, she took her legacy, she took it into her power.
Okay.
So, yeah. And after that, there is another story where she wants to get she gets really horny after she has slept with Thor. And it is said that she has ergi, that is sexual shame. And the way she has sexual shame is that she wants to have sex all the time. She really wants man. That's what it says in the saga, but we have to remember that the saga was written down quite late. And when we follow the story, she's not that promiscuous, actually. She's very passionate, but she's only passionate about one man. And that man's name is Ring, a very important symbol. And in this story about Ring, she wants to go and find this man called Ring. And discovers that he is about to get married to a queen called Ingebjörg. And Ingebjörg is a powerful sorceress. And the way they start to fight over the ring, there is one scene where Arinefja takes Ring into her coat and runs away and gonna throw Ring out of the sea, which tells me that this is actually a ring and not a man.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And this ring symbolizes something. Well, there is a lot here, but the ring has a spiritual significance. And she wants to take it from this other woman. And this other woman is just smarter and stronger than her. So in the end, she has to sort of go stand curt before the queen and like, sorry, I tried to steal your ring. And this queen, Ingebjörg, she's like a secret mentor. You have these mentor figures, both male and female, who appear to be enemies, but actually they are challengers in these stories. And the challenge actually helps the initiate. And in the end of this story, to the very end, Ingebjörg and Arinefja meets up again, and they become really good friends. And Arinefja actually mentors Ingebjörg's son later. So this was a part of the thing. And Ingebjörg says that you have to go to the underworld, the what they call it, the under. I have it here somewhere. Anyway, it says it is direct translated from the underworld. There is another where she has to go and she has to find this drinking horn first. So she goes down into the underworld and she meets Snow King, and she saves Snow's queen from drinking poison. And she sacrifices goats to Snow King as if Snow King was Thor again. And he gives her the drinking horn. And then she has to go to this mountain where she sees 3 giantesses. They are huge and they own the game board of destiny. And she has to wrestle with them to get the game board of destiny, and she manages in the end. And then last but not least, she goes into the underworld again, but this time she has to go even further down. This time she has to go to the underdjup, which means the depths below. That's where she meets Odin. And Odin, just like Thor, he wants to have sex with her. But this is a theme, but it's probably just as symbolic a theme as Well, we shouldn't dismiss the possibility that we are speaking of the use of sexual energies here. Yes, of course, but that's what I mean. It's more of a spiritual, magical thing than actual sex, I think, because because of the other examples we have of death being described in sexual ways. Yeah, so she's in the depth below the underworld, and she has found Odin, and she has sex with Odin, and then after having sex with her, he tells her that how she can find the third thing that this queen wants, and that's a cloak, a skikja. And this cloak is very special because it will, what happens is that this cloak is behind some high flames, and these high flames are repeatedly mentioned in Edda poetry and Skaldic poetry, and they mean the flames of death again, like the wall around Hel's hall. And she has to jump over again. Odin tells her how to jump over the flames, and she jumps over the flames and she gets the cloak, and this cloak will save you from being burned by the flames of death. And it also allows you to change shape, and Arinefja becomes skinless. It's it. She loses her skin. And that doesn't mean that she actually loses her skin. It just means that she loses her determined form. After this, she can assume any shape. After this, she becomes a great shapeshifter, and she becomes a great surgeon and healer, and she becomes a flagdekona, a sorceress, and she's referred to as also as a queen of the giant world of Jotunheimr, and and she becomes mentor to two young men who are out there searching for two young women who have been abducted by the trolls. And these two young women are also very interesting because one is a warrior woman and the other is a wise woman. So they are going through a joint initiation together, where they are taken away. The first one is taken away by a jassi, which means the crown of the head. That's the warrior woman. While the wise woman is taken away by a gammer, that means a vulture, an eagle, just like it's this story again. And they are taken into the realm of the Jötnar, and they're not just like cuddling before. They're not just sitting there passively waiting for these young men to come and get them. First of all, the young men need Arinefja's help to come and get them. A long story that too, but to focus on the women here in this.
Yes, please.
Yeah, we just jump past the young men. They are very, very interesting stories too, but let's move into the young women. So Beckhildir and Brynhildir, that's the warrior woman, and that means armor battle and bench battle. So the wise woman is the bench battle one. She makes her battles while seated on a bench. While Brynhild, she's actually wearing the armor here. So she's the one taken by the crown of the head. So they are to be, they are taken to a cave too, and they're held in this cave, and this is the cave of the trolls, it says. And there is a lawman there of the trolls who is secretly helping them. He's actually their mentor in secret, but the other trolls don't know. And they are told that they have to prove themselves, these young women. They're not just there waiting, they actually have to prove themselves by making something. So both of them make two magical items, and then the other trolls are going to judge which of them is the best, has made the best magical items. Like I think that was Brynhild made a flying carpet.
Okay.
That could take any weight, yeah. And the other made some garment that could protect again, yeah. So the trolls are gathering for parliament to judge whether Brynhild, the warrior woman, or Beckhildir, the wise woman, is the best at making magical things. And the one who is the best is, well, you see the Yassi and this vulture that abduct them, they are really two trolls, and they want to marry these girls, but they are brothers, and they both want to become kings of the giant world. The one abduct one of them, and the other abduct the other princess, the other warrior woman and the wise woman, and the one who has the best woman gets to be the king. So when the trolls judge who of these two have made the best magical thing, then the one who abducted her, who had the best thing, will become king. So this is really important about king, who's going to be king. But meanwhile, these young men and Arinefja, whose name means eagle beak, by the way, and her daughter, she has a daughter by Thor. I forgot to mention that. She has a daughter by Thor called Skinnefja, which means skin beak. And the reference to skin in this story is always about shape changing. So they come, and together with the lawman of the trolls, the two young men have to ritually change into trolls. And they go in there, and there's a long story where they all help each other do amazing feats during this wedding banquet, where they actually disappear with the brides. And after that, the brides and the young men stay for 5 months in the cave of Arinefja before they return back to the world. And then the young men become, they can get married, and they're like finished then. And there are so many stories like this.
Wow.
Lots of stories. The main focus in the saga is usually on the men, but there are lots of sub-stories that are about women.
And are there any stories where the women are also offered that cup of mead, during an experience of initiation? That's the thing I wondered about.
Well, no, not direct. Yes, we have one. We have one, Gudrun, but that's not in the sagas, actually. In the sagas, the drinking horn is mentioned several times, but it's usually given by the woman.
Yeah, exactly.
It's usually
that's the role.
The consecrator who gives the mead. But in the other poems, in the heroic poems, you have this young woman called Gudrun. She's married to one of the initiates, Sigurdur. And she, like him, she can hear the bird. She can understand the language of birds, and it said that she has drunk of the blood of the serpent, which made her able to understand the language of birds. And so she's talented already. And her brothers kill her husband, and she is so devastated by this, because not only have they killed her beloved husband, she really loved him. But they also dethroned her, because where they were from, her husband, she was the daughter of the queen, and her husband was the next king. So her brothers, because of a long story, to make the long story short, her brothers actually dethroned her, their own sister, and her husband, in order to rule themselves. And she is so shocked and so devastated, so she curses her brothers and says that they will never enjoy this rule, and then she runs into the wilderness. It's said that she feels as if her bones are burned like twigs, and she is surrounded by wolves. She lives with wolves, and she's in the wilderness. And there are loads of poetical, metaphorical references to death. She's going through a death, and she's suffering. She is really suffering, but she's pregnant, and she comes to a place that it's said to be the hall of her friend Thora. But the hall, the way it is described, and the lake outside makes it very clear that she has come to the realm of the Norns. And when she stays there, and she gives birth there, and she stays there, and she learns how to weave fate.
Wow, gosh.
Yeah, so she learned how to weave fate. So and while but she's still very pissed off at her brothers. So she weaves a very terrible fate for them.
I was going to say,
but her mother, her mother her mother Grimhildur, she also knows how to, well, if she doesn't know how to weave fate, she knows how to see fate in a weave. And she can see how Gudrun is weaving. By looking at her own weave, she can see how Gudrun is weaving. And she's like, oh my gosh, shit. Okay, come here, sons. She summons the brothers, and she tells them, now we have to find your sister Gudrun, and you have to really bloody apologize and offer compensation, and just lay yourself flat now, because she is making a terrible destiny for you. So they go there and they find her, and she's like, no way, I'm not forgiving this. No. Even though they're pleading with her and offering her all sorts of things, you know, they really even want to give her a throne back. And she is like, no way. But then Mother Grimhildur comes forth with a horn, a drinking horn of mead.
Okay.
And this drinking horn is carved with runes. And when she takes it, she says, Gudrun takes it, and she says, my mother gave me this full horn to drink, and I could see the drink. It was made by the power of earth, Jarðarmegin, the power of earth, and it was also made by the cold sea, and it was also made by the blood of the the blood of the atonement. And that means the blood of atonement, and the blood of maybe the atonement that her brothers were trying to give her. And it was made by the blood. It also means sacrifice, the blood of sacrifice. And this formula that she says that this drink is made of, this formula is repeated in a completely different poem, Edda poem, Hyndluljóð, where it is said that Heimdallr, whose name, by the way, means great world, Heimdallr was born from 9 mothers, and he was made to grow by the power of earth, by the cold sea, and by the blood of the atonement. This is what the mead is made of, is exactly the same as the ingredients that made this universe come.
Wow.
Yeah, she's given this, and later on she becomes she marries, she becomes a queen among the Huns, and she's a rune master. She can read and carve runes, and she can make the whole hall of the Huns fall asleep so that she can kill Atli the Hun, which is of course a way of saying Attila the Hun. This story reaches back into the migration ages, the age of the Huns, age of Attila the Hun. Attila died in 450, in the 450s. And you know, in historical sources, the Huns claim that Atli died during his wedding night to a Germanic princess out of heart attack. But there are other stories. There are other stories saying that he was actually killed by this bride because he had killed her brothers. This is exactly this is the exact reason why Gudrun kills Atli, because he has killed her brothers in a terrible way. She's also a warrior woman, by the way. She makes the entire hall. She performs a very gory sacrifice. She didn't have much love for the children she had by Atli.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Oh, that's a terrible story.
Yeah, she made the entire hall eat.
Yeah, I know. Ooh.
Yeah, these two. Very terrible story. She's not. She turns into it's a very interesting character arc in this story, because she's this young, lovely, beautiful, innocent maiden who's so much in love, so naive, and she doesn't realize what had been going on before her brothers killed her husband. And she goes there, and she goes through initiation. She becomes very powerful, but she doesn't become happy. She's already broken, but she knows that she's at least going to do something that she thinks is good. And so there was this historical source saying that actually there was this rumor that this princess had actually killed him during their wedding night. but they didn't want to admit it. And what actually happened after Attila died, historical Attila, is that this Hunnish empire that has cemented itself in Central Europe for more than a century already, it dissolved. And I think that maybe this poem, this may be the one source we have that sort of seems to celebrate this woman, because she is really celebrated after, although she's described as really sad person. There is not much love left. She has nothing left now but her vengeance.
Yeah.
And it's a very tragic story for her personally.
Yeah.
But she's also described as there's these poetical terms like she's the last bride in armor. Never again will a woman. We have no more such brides in armor. There are no more such warrior women in the world. She was the last. And it's like it really praises her because from that mindset that they had back then, which is obviously different from how we see things. This act of vengeance was a way of restoring harmony and order. It was important to them. For us, that's wrong. I mean, I think it's wrong, but for them, that was just very deeply set in their culture that you couldn't really have peace. Your loved ones couldn't have peace if you didn't restore. They often restored order by just making someone who killed someone pay a fine or something, but sometimes the hurt was too big, and she had a lot to be angry with Atle with, and he had destroyed her entire people. The Huns had destroyed, they had massacred her entire people before she did that. So yeah.
So like, what is proper compensation? I mean, that's wow.
Yeah, for her it was to do to the Huns what they had done to the Bergens, who were her people. So
Maria,
but she also drank. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I have more questions, but I'm also a bit concerned about time. I don't want to eat your whole evening.
Yes.
Like, do you have time for another question?
Yes. Okay. One more, I think. Yeah.
Let's look at my list and pick the best one.
Yeah.
Well, as you were just talking about the Huns, the thing that I'm interested in is we have the Norse figure of the vulva, and then we have the Veleda in Germany. And we're just like in that territory, you're just talking about that. So have you got any idea how that is related or how those peoples interacted? Was that a similar figure or were they different figures?
Yeah, very similar figures. You could say that between we have many. I have found in this when I started doing this series. I'm sorry, I'm just really gonna undress here. Sorry, that's it. Okay, this was hot here. I'm just gonna close this. Where was I? Yeah, I'm just gonna find the list here. Yeah, I found from the Roman Iron Age, I found Roman descriptions of several different Germanic oracles, and they are described in a way that shows that the Romans looked at these Germanic oracle women as exactly like oracles that they knew from Greece, for example, like the Oracle of Delphi. They refer to them as oracles or sibyls and as Pythians, like the Oracle of Delphi. So the Romans didn't really see any difference between the oracles of the classical world and the oracles that they saw existed among the different Germanic tribes. And these women were very much revered. We have several descriptions of these such oracles that they called Sibyllas in the Roman sources, who were hired. There's one you find even from Egypt. You find this payroll that belonged to a Roman officer who lived in Egypt, and he had hired a sibyl, and her name was Valuborg. That means the fortress of the Völva, or the fortress of the Wand. And she was hired. She was on his payroll, And she's also mentioned in another source. So we know that there was this woman, and she was of the people called the Semnones, who lived somewhere around northern Germany or the Jutland Peninsula area. The Semnones, Germanic people. So she was referred to as Valborg of the Semnones, and she worked in Egypt as the Roman officer's personal oracle. And that's just one sample. We have, of course, the most famous one is Veleda, whose name might mean seer. And she sat in this high tower, elevated tower, and she was treated like a goddess. She received sacrifice in the form of spoils of war. She was a diplomat between the different tribes. She was from a particular tribe, the Brukteri, but she made sure that many tribes joined together. She was actually very important in a rebellion against the Romans when she lived. And she became the oracle of all the tribes around there, all the tribes that had gone into federation. She was like the uniting point. We have also stories of Ganna, who was her apprentice, Veleda's apprentice. Ganna means gander, which means wand again, or magic. And we know that she accompanied one of the Germanic kings when he went on an embassy to Rome, to the Roman emperor. So she was there when the king had to see the emperor. The king brought his oracle, and all the descriptions show that they are regarded almost like goddesses, and they are really honored women. Veleda ended her life as a prisoner of Rome, but she was actually sort of free. We found this pot. Well, not me. Someone found this potsherd that had Greek inscriptions on it, and it was from Ardea in southern Italy, and it was from the time when Veleda lived. And it describes Veleda as being really tall, really arrogant. They didn't like her. She was tall, she was arrogant, and she was worshipped as a goddess by the Rhine drinkers, the people who drank water from Rhine, the River Rhine, the Germans, basically. And we have this other story about a woman called Gambara, which actually is probably a Latinized version of Gandbera, wand carrier. And she was the one who led. Well, she was the one who led the Langobards away from their island in Scandinavia, according to 3 different sources, and 3 very different sources. So this is probably a legend that has maybe some basis in reality, or at least something that was being told a lot, because these sources are from different centuries and different places. They all tell the same story, that this Gandbe, this wand-carrying woman, was the priestess and a leader among the Vinili. And she was the one who prayed to Freya so that they could have victory over the Vandals. Right. And the Vandals, they had prayed to Wotan, but Wotan said that Odin, he had said that, well, I'll give the victory to the first people I see in the morning. So Gambara, she went to Freya and said, hey, can you fix this for me? And Freya said, yeah, I can fix this for you. Make the women stand with, put their long hair and tie it in front of their chins, so it looks like they have long beards. And then I will help you. So Gambara did her part. She made all the women of the tribe stand there with long beards in the morning, so that when the enemy came, when the Vandals came, they thought that they saw a number of warriors that was double the actual number of male warriors. So they thought the enemy had twice as many warriors as they had expected. And then Freya had, meanwhile, while Odin slept, she had sort of turned his bed, so that when he woke up, the first thing he saw were these people. He was like, all right, these have really long beards. Who are these long beards? And after that, the Vinili never call themselves Vinili anymore. They call themselves Longbeards, Langobards. And there's still a place in Italy called Lombardy. Yeah. which is after these people, and she was their prophet, sort of. And so and there are many things that show that these women were very similar to the Völur of the saga and the Edda sources, but there is a stretch of almost 1,000 years, and there is one big difference in the Scandinavian sources of the Viking Age and after from the Germanic oracle times. Things were different. Probably things were very different in Scandinavia than it was on the continent. I don't know, but Norway was a bit like it has been at least Norway has been. Let's say if I fly in an airplane above Europe, I see loads of towns and cities, and in between the towns and cities there are fields and then maybe some patches of forest. Then we fly in over Norway and it's like forest. There is a house. Forest. There's a house. Forest. Oh, there are 2 houses together. Wow, it's so that's to put it a bit. That's to exaggerate a little bit, but that's the thing. In Norway, you couldn't really have a temple where all the people from around could come. It wasn't possible. You had mountains, and you could only travel by sea, really, unless you wanted to spend years going from one side of the country to the other. So and people lived separate. So they had a completely different style, where the women didn't actually stay one place while the other people came. The women just walked around. Sometimes they are described as having apprentices. Several times they are described as having apprentices, and they travel with these. And they only go somewhere if they are invited. And there is always a ritual description, and many descriptions of this, where the chief, the husbond, the man, or the patriarch of the settlement, people like, oh, there is a vulva coming, walking around here. And they say, oh yeah, okay, let's that. He was expected to organize and pay for the whole party because this was expensive. But he had to send, so just like Odin in the Völuspá, Odin goes to her himself and he offers her gifts to speak her property, and then she sees widely into all the worlds. And in the saga stories, the chief either goes himself or he sends someone to invite her, and then she says, all right, I'll come then and then. And when she comes, it's like this big occasion where everybody are gathered and there is a big banquet, and she's allowed to sit in the hovsetet, the high seat. That's the place where the chief, either the patriarch and his wife, or the matriarch, or the head of the family or the head of the settlement would sit in the high seat. And only if they were visited by the king or someone higher than them in status would they relinquish their seat. But they relinquished their seat to this woman. And there are some stories where someone is treating her badly, and there is always they always make a point out of this being really unusual, that she's like really shocked. This has never happened before, and this is something that didn't happen. Mostly people revere them, so and their role, the way they prophesy, and the way people listen to them, I'm definitely sure that they were direct descendants, if not exactly the same, because they have a little bit different societal position. They were suddenly sort of like they did not live in a temple, really. They were hardcore. They were tough. They walked around, sometimes alone. But as we see in many stories, if they saw a vulva walk around, she was quite safe. She was respected by everyone. And they also make a point out of, because this society, this Viking Age society, was for as much as we find it very interesting and fascinating and in many ways nice, it wasn't that nice. It was a very, no, it wasn't. It was a class society. It was a slave society. It was a hierarchic society. But the stories, but the sagas make a point out of the fact that she is beyond that. She can speak to people exactly as she feels like. She doesn't have to bow to the ones above and ignore the ones below. She will talk to people as she feels.
Yeah.
And she's given special food. She's given lots of rich. Also, they do treat her, and she gets lots of gifts when she parts. So yeah, they had a very high position in society, and it is quite amazing that even in the saga literature, which was written down between the 1100s, 1200s, 1300s, some even as late as the 1400s, some are even later. They stretched. It was a century-long tradition. And while they describe the male sorcerers in sort of negative terms, they have this amazing, deep respect for these women. They are described very respectfully, always. It's very interesting that they're still respected, and they are in those. For example, Saxo, he was a Danish chronicler. He wrote these stories in Latin, and even he refers to them as oraculi, as oracles, and Pythians, like Pythia in the Oracle of Delphi.
Yeah.
Delphian arts, he says.
Delphian arts. Oh wow.
Yeah. He refers. So he sees. They back then they saw this similarity. For them it was the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Saxo Grammaticus, isn't it? Yeah.
Saxo Grammaticus. Yeah. He was a Dane. He lived. Was a little bit older than Snorri, but they wrote roughly around the same time. And Saxo is a bit. It's actually quite fun to read, but he's preaching all the time. He has a very negative attitude to paganism and pagan gods. So he's like all the time, but he does tell the stories. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is I've taken a lot of your time. I think that is a wonderful place to leave it for today. Did you want to keep any projects you're working on and mention before we close the session? Anything you're working on you want my audience to hear about?
Well, yeah. I just recently published a book about Iðunn, where I go through the different sources, the Hausløgn, the Skallig, the Rafnagalder-Odins, and the Skaldskaparmál. I talk a lot about Iðunn. And my thesis, The Maiden with the Mead, is about to be republished by the Three Little Sisters. And it is different now. It's more, I have worked on it. So it's an extended version, much bigger, and a lot more, just more detail, more filled. So the Maiden with the Mead that I wrote as a university thesis back in 2004 is just like the skeleton of this new edition.
How exciting.
And and I have already given that over to the publisher, so I assume that they are going to publish it this year, I think. And what I'm trying to finish right now is the book called frolicking, Great Knowledge, Stories of Seiðr and Initiation. And I have decided to put the part of witches and warriors, initiation narratives, and spiritual mentors in the sagas as a part of that book, because the theme of Seiðr and frolicking, Great Knowledge, is so important in these stories. So it's going to be a big book, and that I'm working on finishing this now, so that is probably going to be published next year. And I have this graphic novel, because back in my 20s I made this huge big graphic novel that never got published because some Norwegian publisher told me that now this won't sell enough. This was back in the 25 years ago, 20 years ago at least.
Late 1990s.
And they didn't think that it would be possible to sell it. So I've used many of the artwork in my videos, and some of the stories I've even retold in my videos, but now I am working on translating it into English, because it was in Norwegian, and it will be published by the first part now will be published by the Three Little Sisters probably next year. I think it's already late into the and I have some other work that I might start on after that with a Norwegian publisher, but there's probably going to be a book about like an autobiography of Odin, about Odin,
Oh.
and it's going to be in English, I think, or it's going to be translated into English. So that's, and yeah, the rest is still just in the beginning. So I think I'll just stop there.
Wow, there's plenty to be getting on with, and it sounds like I need to update my reading list for all students. There's several new books put on the reading list. So.
You know, I have novels too.
Thank you for that mention. Yeah. Okay, that's wonderful. So I think we're all very happy. Like, we can't get enough of Maria Kvilhaug. So please keep on writing and making videos. And I know you have your Facebook page where you have interesting discussions, so people can check that out. And follow Maria on Patreon. You have a Patreon account. So it's lots.
I present lots of this on my Patreon. All the things that we have talked about. Lots of it is in lectures and videos.
So there you go. Patreon. So that's what I recommend you people. If you're listening to this and you want more, that's the place to go. So sign up for Maria's Patreon account. So thank you so much. You've been very generous with your time. I know it's an hour later in Norway than it is in London.
So
bring it.
Always. Yeah. Okay, thank you. It was
so much,
nice to speak to you.
Yeah. Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.